Chapter 9 of Book 6 of Topics by Aristotle, translated by Octavius Owen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 9 of Definition as to Contraries, etc. Moreover, if there be the definition of a habit, take notice of what possesses it. But if the definition be of what possesses, consider the habit. And in like manner with regard to other things of this kind, e.g., if the pleasant is what is beneficial, he also who is pleased is benefited. In a word, it happens after a certain manner in such definitions that the definer defines more things than one, since he who defines science after a certain way defines ignorance also. Likewise, the scientific and the unscientific, also to know and to be ignorant. For the first being evident, the rest also in some way become evident. We must examine then, in all such cases, lest anything should be discordant, employing the elements which are from contraries and conjugates. Examine too, in relatives, whether to what genus is referred, to that a certain species is referred. For instance, if apprehension to the object of apprehension, a certain apprehension also is referred to a certain object of apprehension, and if the multiple is to the submultiple, whether a certain multiple is to a certain submultiple, since if there is not such reference, there has been evidently an error. Again, observe whether there is an opposite definition of the opposite, as whether the definition of the half is opposite to that of the double, since if the double be that which surpasses in the equal, the half will be what is surpassed in the equal. Likewise also in the case of contraries, for the definition of the contrary will be contrary according to one certain connection of contraries. Thus, if that is beneficial which is productive of good, what is productive of evil, or is corruptive of good, is injurious, since one of these must necessarily be contrary to that mentioned at first. If then neither be contrary to that mentioned at first, it is clear that neither of the definitions afterwards given can be the definition of the contrary, so that neither has the definition given at first been rightly given. Nevertheless, since some contraries are said to be so from the privation of another, as inequality seems the privation of equality, for things are called unequal which are not equal, it is clear that what is stated to be contrary as to privation is necessarily defined through the other, but that it is no longer necessary that what remains should be defined through what is predicated as to privation, for each would happen to become known through each. We must pay attention, therefore, to such an error as this in contraries, as if some one should define equality to be the contrary to inequality, since it is defined through what is predicated according to privation. Further, it is necessary that he who thus defines should use the thing defined, which indeed will be evident if the definition be assumed instead of the name, for there is no difference between saying inequality or the privation of equality. Wherefore, equality will be the contrary to the privation of equality, so that the thing itself defined will be employed. Still, if neither contrary should be predicated according to privation, but the definition similarly assigned, as that good is what is contrary to evil, it is evident that evil will be what is contrary to good, since of things thus contrary the definition must be similarly assigned. Wherefore, again, the thing defined happens to be employed, as good is inherent in the definition of evil, so that if good is what is contrary to evil, but there is no difference between evil and the contrary to good, good will be that which is contrary to the contrary of good, so that the person has evidently used the thing itself. Further, remark whether he who assigns what is predicated according to privation has not assigned that of which it is the privation, for instance of habit, or of contrary, or of whatever it is the privation, or whether he has not added that in which it is naturally adapted to be generated, either simply, or in which first it is adapted to be generated. Thus, if stating ignorance to be privation, a person has not said that it is a privation of science, or has not added in what it is naturally adapted to be produced, or having added it, has not assigned in what first, as that it is not in the reasoning faculty, but in man or soul, for if he has not done some one of these, he commits an error. So also, if he should not have said that blindness is privation of sight in the eye, for it is requisite that he who well assigns what privation is, should also assign of what it is the privation, and again what that is, which is deprived. Observe also whether a person has defined by privation that which is not predicated according to privation, which fault they will appear to commit in the definition of ignorance, who do not speak of ignorance according to negation. For that which has not science does not seem to be ignorant, but rather that which is deceived. Hence we neither say that inanimate things, nor children are ignorant, so that ignorance is not predicated according to the privation of science. Chapter 10. As to the similarity of cases in the definition and in the noun. Again, examine whether similar cases of the definition agree with similar cases of the noun. For instance, if the beneficial is what produces health, whether beneficially be productively, and that was beneficial, which was productive of health. Besides, observe whether the definition stated accords to the idea, since in some things this does not happen, as when Plato in his definition of animals adds, quotes, mortals, for idea will not be mortal, for instance, man, self, wherefore the definition will not suit the idea. In short, it is necessary that the definition of those things to which the effective or the passive is added should be discrepant with the idea, since ideas appear to those who say that there are ideas to be impassive and immovable, and against these such arguments are useful. Yet further, in things predicated equivocally, observe whether a person has assigned one common definition of them all. For those are synonymous of which there is one definition according to the name, wherefore the assigned definition is of no one of those contained under the name, since indeed the equivocal similarly suits everything. The definition given by Dionysius of life has this fault, if it be the motion innate and consequent of a nourished genus, for this is not more inherent in animals than in plants. But life does not seem predicated as to one species, but one kind of life to be inherent in animals, and another in plants. Therefore, it is possible on purpose to assign a definition thus, as if all life were synonymous and predicated of one species. Yet nothing prevents a man, while he sees the equivocation, and wishes to assign the definition of the other, from being ignorant that he does not assign a proper definition, but one common to both. Notwithstanding, he will not less err if he has framed it in either way, since indeed some equivocations escape us. The interrogator ought to use them as synonyms, as the definition of the one will not be adapted to the other, so that it will appear in a way not to have been defined, as the synonymous ought to suit everything. On the other hand, the respondent must distinguish by division. Still, since some respondents say that the synonymous is equivocal when the assigned definition does not suit everything, but that the equivocal is synonymous if it suit both, it must be previously acknowledged, or previously inferred of these, that they are equivocal or synonymous, whichever they may be, since they more readily concur who do not foresee the result. Nevertheless, if they cannot agree, but some one should say that the synonymous is equivocal because the assigned definition does not suit this, observe whether the definition of this accords also to the rest, as it is evident it will be synonymous with the rest. If not, however, there will be many definitions of the remainder, since two definitions according to the name accord to them, viz. Both the prior and the posterior assigned. Again, if a person having defined any of those multifariously predicated, the definition also not suiting all, should not indeed say that it is equivocal, but should deny that the name suits all, because the definition does not, against such a one we may say that it is necessary to use that appellation which has been delivered and received, and not to disturb such things. Nevertheless, some must not be enunciated in a way similar to the multitude. Chapter 11. Of composite and singular definition. If the definition of some connected thing should be given, consider, taking away the definition of one of the things connected, whether the remaining definition be that of what remains. For if not, neither, it is evident, will the whole be of the whole. Thus, if some one defined a finite straight line to be the boundary of a superficies having boundaries, of which the middle covers the extremities, if the definition of a finite line is the boundary of a superficies having boundaries, it is necessary that the remainder should be that of a straight line, of which the middle covers the extremities. Yet an infinite has neither middle nor extremities, but is nevertheless straight, so that the remainder is not the definition of the remainder. Moreover, observe, if when what is defined is a composite, the definition is assigned consisting of as many members as the thing defined. Now a definition is said to be of an equal number of members, when there are as many nouns and verbs in the definition as there are composites. For it is necessary in such cases that there should be a change of the names, either of all or of some of them, since there are no more names stated now than before. Still, it is requisite that he who defines should give a sentence instead of names, of all, if possible, but if not, of most things. For thus also in simple things he who changes the name will have defined, as, for instance, if he should say vestment instead of garment. Besides, there is a greater error if a person has made a change for names more unknown. For instance, a white mortal instead of a white man, for neither is there a definition, and what is stated thus is less clear. Examine also in the change of names whether he does not signify still the same thing, as when a person states that contemplative science is contemplative opinion, for opinion is not the same with science, at least indeed it must be, if the whole is to be the same. For contemplative is common in both definitions, but what remains is different. Further, when a person changes one of the names, observe whether a change is made, not of the difference, but of the genus, as in the instance just now stated, since contemplative is more unknown than science, as the one is genus, and the other difference, and genus is more known of all, so that he ought to have made the change not of the genus, but of the difference, since this is the more unknown. Or is this reproof ridiculous, as there is nothing to prevent difference from being signified by a name most known, but genus not? But if this is the case, it is clear that we must make a change as to the name of genus, and not of difference. Nevertheless, if a person does not assume a name for a name, but a sentence instead of a name, it is clear that he must give the definition of difference rather than of genus, since definition is given in order to make a thing known, for difference is less known than genus. Chapter 12. The same subject continued. If, however, the definition of difference is assigned, examine whether the assigned difference is common to anything else, as when it is said that an odd number is a number which has a middle, it must be defined in addition how it has a middle. For number is common in both definitions, but instead of odd, a sentence is assumed. Yet both a line and a body have a middle, though they are not odd numbers, so that this would not be the definition of the odd. Still, if that which has a middle be multifariously predicated, we must explain besides how it possesses a middle, so that there will be either a reproof or a syllogism that the thing has not been defined. Again, observe if that of which the definition is the sign belongs to the number of beings, but what is under the definition does not, e.g. if white is defined colour mixed with fire, for it is impossible that the incorporeal should be mixed with body, so that it could not be colour mixed with fire, yet it is white. Moreover, those who in the definition of relatives do not distinguish to what reference is made, but speak comprehending many things, either wholly or in part enunciate falsely, as if some one should say that medicine is the science of being. For if medicine is the science of nothing which exists, it is evident that the definition is wholly false, but if it is of one, but not of the other, it is partly false. For it is necessary to be the science of everything, if it is said to be the science of being per se, and not accidentally, as is the case with other relatives, since every object of science is referred to science. Likewise also in other things, since all relatives reciprocate. Besides, if he who explains a thing not per se, but accidentally, rightly explains it, each relative would not be referred to one, but to many things, as there is nothing to prevent the same thing being both white and good, so that he who explains by reference to one of these would rightly explain, if he who explains from accident does so rightly. Moreover, it is impossible that such a definition as this should be peculiar to the thing assigned, for not only medicine, but many other sciences are referred to what exists, so that each will be the science of being. Wherefore it is clear that such is the definition of no science, for it is necessary that definition should be peculiar and not common. Sometimes, indeed, they define not the thing only, but a thing in a good condition, or perfect. Such is the definition of a rhetorician, and of a thief, since a rhetorician is one who is able to perceive what is persuasive in each thing, and to omit nothing, but a thief is one who takes on the sly, for it is evident that each being such will be good, the one a good rhetorician, but the other a good thief, for not he who pilfers secretly is a thief, but he who wishes to pilfer secretly. Again, he errs who assigns what is of itself eligible, as practical or efficient, or in any way eligible on account of something else, as if he said that justice is the preserver of the laws, or that wisdom is effective of felicity, for what is effective or preservative is of the number of things eligible on account of something else, or does nothing prevent what is eligible for itself being eligible for something else also. Nevertheless, he errs who thus defines what is eligible per se, since in everything the best especially subsists in the essence, but it is better to be eligible per se than on account of something else, so that definition ought of necessity rather to signify this. Chapter 13. Of distinctive notions in definition. Consider besides whether he who assigns the definition of a certain thing defines that it is these things, or that which consists of these, or this together with that. For if it should be those things, it would happen to be present with both, and with neither, as if he defined justice to be temperance and fortitude. For if when there are two, each has one of these, both will be just, and neither, since both indeed will possess justice, but each of them not possess it. If, however, what has been said be not very absurd from a thing of this kind happening in others also, since nothing prevents two persons having a mina, though neither of them has. Yet that contraries should be present with the same would appear to be altogether absurd. Nevertheless, this would occur if one of them has temperance and timidity, but the other fortitude and intemperance. For both will have justice and injustice. For if justice be temperance and fortitude, injustice will be timidity and intemperance. Briefly, whatever arguments may be brought to prove that the parts and the whole are not the same, are all useful for what has now been stated, since he who thus defines seems to say that the parts are the same as the whole. Still, the arguments are especially appropriate in whatever the composition of the parts is evident, as in a house and other such things, for it is evident that when the parts exist there is nothing to prevent the whole from not existing, so that the parts are not the same with the whole. If, on the other hand, he should say that the thing defined is not these, but something consisting of these, we must first examine whether one certain thing is not naturally adapted to be produced from these. For some things are so subsistent in relation to each other as that nothing is produced from them, for instance, a line and number. Besides, whether the thing defined is naturally adapted to be in some one first, but those of which a person says that it, the thing defined, consists, are not in some one first, but each in the other, since it is clear that the thing would not consist of these, as in what the parts are inherent, it is necessary that the whole also should be inherent, so that the whole would not be in one first, but in many. Still, if the parts and the whole are in one first, consider whether they are not in the same, but the whole in one, and the parts in another. Again, whether the parts are destroyed together with the whole, since it is necessary that it should happen vice versa, the parts being destroyed that the whole should perish, but the whole being destroyed, it is not necessary that the parts also should be destroyed. Or whether the whole be good or evil, but the parts neither, or vice versa, the parts indeed good or evil, but the whole neither, for neither is it possible that any good or evil should be produced from neither, nor that neither should be produced from evil or good, or whether the one be more good than the other is evil, but what consists of these be not more good than evil. For instance, if impudence should be said to consist of fortitude and false opinion, for fortitude is more a good than false opinion is an evil, wherefore it is necessary that what results from these should be consequent to the more, and should either be simply good, or more good than evil. Or indeed is this unnecessary, unless each be good or evil per se, for many effective things are not per se good, but when mingled, or on the contrary each of them is good, but when mingled is evil, or neither good nor evil. What has been now stated is especially apparent in the case of things wholesome and hurtful, since some drugs are of such a nature as that each is good, but if both be given mixed together, the compound is bad. Again, consider whether a thing be stated to consist from the better and the worse, of which the whole is not worse than the better, but is better than the worse, or is neither this necessary, unless those of which the thing consists be of themselves good. For there is nothing to prevent the whole not being good, as in the instances just now adduced. Besides, whether the whole be synonymous with the other part, which it ought not to be, as neither is it in syllables, for a syllable is synonymous with no one of the elements of which it consists. Moreover, observe whether a person has explained the mode of composition, for it is not sufficient to a knowledge of a thing to say that it consists of these, because not merely to consist of these, but to consist of them in this manner, is the essence of composites, as in the case of a house, for the composition of these in any way whatever is not a house. If, again, this thing is assigned together with that, we must first state that this is with that, or is the same with these, or because this is from those. For he who says honey with water either says honey and water, or what consists of honey and water, so that whichever of these he allows to be the same as this with that, the same things it will be suitable to say, as were before urged against each of these. Further, distinguishing in how many ways one thing is said to be with another, consider whether this be in no way with that, e.g. if it is said that one is with another, either as in one same recipient, as justice and fortitude in the soul, or in the same place or time. But what is asserted as to these should be by no means true. The assigned definition would, it is evident, not be the definition of anything, as this is by no means with that. If, however, when the things are distinguished, it is true that each is in the same time, examine whether it is possible that each may not be referred to the same thing, as if some one should define fortitude to be daring joined with right conception. For it is possible for a man to have the daring to defraud, yet a right conception about things wholesome. Still, he is not yet a brave man who has this together with that in the same time. Again, if both are referred to the same thing, as to things medical, since nothing prevents a man's having boldness and right conception about medical concerns, yet nevertheless he is not a brave man who possesses this with that. For neither ought each of them to be referred to different things, nor to anything casually the same, but to the end of fortitude, as to warlike dangers, or if there be anything more the end than this. Some indeed of those thus explained by no means fall under the above mentioned division, as if anger is pain joined with the notion of being despised, for this would show that pain arises from a notion of this kind, but that anything should exist on account of this is not the same as for this to be with that, according to any of the modes stated. Chapter 14. On the definition of the whole as a composite, etc. Moreover, if a person has stated the whole to be a composition of these, as that animal is a compound of soul and body, first observe whether he has not stated the quality of the composition, as if defining flesh or bone, he should say that it is a compound of fire, earth, and air, for it is not enough to say it is a compound, but it must also be defined of what quality it, the compound, is, since flesh is not produced from the composition of these in any way whatever, but flesh from things composed in this way, and bone from those in that. It seems likely, indeed, that neither of those mentioned is altogether the same with composition, as to all composition, dissolution is contrary, but nothing to any of those stated. Besides, if it is similarly probable that every or no compound is composition, but each animal being a compound is not composition, neither will any other compound be composition. Again, if in like manner contraries are naturally adapted to be in something, and it has been defined through one of them alone, there has evidently not been a definition. Otherwise, indeed, there will happen to be many definitions of the same thing. For what more does he state who has defined through this, than he who has done so through the other, since both are in a similar manner naturally adapted to be in it? Such indeed is the definition of the soul, if it is an essence capable of science, for it is equally capable of ignorance. Notwithstanding, if a person has it not in his power to argue against the whole definition from the whole not being known, he must attack some part, if it should be known and apparently not be well assigned. Since the part being subverted, the whole definition also is subverted. It is also requisite, correcting and reforming such definitions as are obscure, in order to render something evident, and to obtain an argument, to consider in this way, since it is necessary for the respondent either to admit what is taken up by the interrogator, or himself to unfold what that is which is signified by the definition. Yet more, as men are accustomed in assemblies to introduce a law, and if what is introduced be better, they abrogate the former law, so we must act in definitions, and another definition must be introduced, since if this appear better, and more to develop the thing defined, it is evident that the definition laid down previously will be subverted, since there are not many definitions of the same thing. Nevertheless, it is not the least element, as to all definitions, to define with oneself sagaciously the thing proposed, or to take up a definition which has been well framed, since it is necessary, running as it were to an example, to survey what is deficient in the definition, and what is superfluously added, so as to be better provided with arguments. Let then so much suffice for those points which pertain to definitions. End of chapter 14 and end of book 6. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.